Kasika nikorani wao nikapusie Aena kaeta nikona imerawa Kasika nikorani wao nikapusie Aena kaeta nikona imerawa Kasika nikorani wao nikapusie Baena kaeta nikona imerawa Kasika nikorani wao nikapusie Baena kaeta nikona imerawa
Aloha. I hope we're live. I hope we're here and we're on. We've been having some technical issues, but here we are. Aloha. We welcome you to TeAda Productions Masters of the Currents Coconut Wireless Series. My name is Ova Saopang. I am the co-artistic director of TeAda Productions and cast member in the play Masters of the Currents.
My name is Jacelyn Ifanuk. I am Micronesian and a cast member in Masters of the Currents. Uh, yes, currently residing on native land Ahon Chuyuk and Kalapuya. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We will be your hosts for today's episode. TeAda Productions is a nomadic theater of color rooted in the stories of immigrants and refugees. We are committed to healing and honoring the lives of the displaced, exploited, and overlooked. We offer acts of services that are creative, transformative, and impactful.
That's right. And TeAda's been around for 20 plus years. We've been touring various different shows developed by communities. We wish to acknowledge the Tongva people as the original inhabitants of the land that TeAda Production resides in, which is here in Los Angeles, California. They are the stewards of the land and the sea. Wherever we are in the world, let us recognize the ongoing struggles of First Nations to preserve language, culture, and sacred sites. This week has been a really hard week for the Asian community and the Asian American community. Um, we just wanted to recognize that this week's terrorist attack in Atlanta has left us devastated and heartbroken. The senseless murders of 8 people, the majority of whom were Asian American women, hit home. And as an organization founded and led by people of color, we can't let acts of white supremacy continue to disrupt the social justice movements and inclusive representation in the sectors that we work in society. So today's Coconut Wireless is dedicated to the people who have been lost. And I will name them now. Sun Chung Park, 74. Hyung Jung Grant, 51. Sun Ja Kim, 69. Yong Ai Yue, 63. Xiao J. Emily Tan, 49. Dao Yo Feng, 44. Delana Ashley Yan, 33. Paul Andre Michaels, 54. And TeAda Productions would like for you, if for ways for you to support what is going on right now currently in our nation, we direct you to the Asian Americans Advancing Justice in Atlanta to help the victims and the families and the community directly affected by this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ova. Pacifica sends our love to our Asian brothers and sisters. This is our third Coconut Wireless episode, a space where we center Micronesian voices and highlight Pacific Islander perspectives. This series began early in the pandemic during isolation as we took inspiration from our touring show, Masters of the Currents.
Mm-hmm.
Stay connected and informed. Masters of the Currents is the first play about Micronesians touring the continent and was developed in Hawaii with the Micronesian community. It has toured to Hawaii, California, and Minnesota with more tours to come.
Yes, hopefully more tours. We'll be presenting at USC Visions and Voices, and
Mhm.
then we will also be presenting at Utah, hopefully in the fall. And hopefully that one will be live because obviously with the pandemic still on us, we still need to figure out how best to do it. And we hope to be presenting it again in Hawaii at the Kata Confest, which is the conference and festival by the Coalition of Asian American Theaters and Artists. Now, Coconut Wireless, this is our third series. Our first episode that we had worked on was a discussion with elders from the Chuukese and Samoan and Chamorro communities and the challenges of preserving cultural knowledge and traditions. Our second episode, we talked about traditional dances of the Pacific and how it has shifted through time and changed. And today's episode, we wanted to focus it on the impact of climate change. No better people than the people of Oceania know about climate change. So from the front lines in Chuk to the advocacy in theater and the relocation of people from islands to inland, we have some great speakers for you today.
All right, all the way from Chuk, we got Jess Phillip, the Conservation and Environment Program Coordinator.
Yeah, go ahead, Jess. Why don't you open up your camera so we can see you? Open up your video so we can see you and just say hi. Jess, if you hear us, go ahead and open your camera. All the way from Chuk. Good to
Hey,
see you,
Jess.
Jess. Welcome.
Guys.
Looking forward for you to share with us. Now, all the way from California, we have Kiki Rivera, who is a performing artist and playwright. Wonderful, wonderful. I love Kiki. Via the way from Hawaii all the way to California. And then finally, our third speaker will be Vince Diaz, who is professor in the Department of American Indian Studies at the University of Minnesota. The Gophers! Woo-woo! Now, all our guests today will be presenting from their unique lens on the repercussions of climate change within their communities. And so after they present and share, we will have a conversation and a dialogue together just from the lens of the Pacific Islands. But before we get to the presentations, hey, Jayceline, let's launch into an excerpt from Masters of the Currents to give us a nice foundation for our discussion.
All right, so the video we're about to show is the opening scene to Masters of the Currents, performed in Minneapolis, Minnesota, presented by Pangea World Theater in May 2019, where we met Vince.
There is nothing micro about Micronesia. We have big families, we have big minds, and we have big hearts. Micronesia is a term some European explorer assigned to us on a map, but our people are more than just dots on a map. We've been given the big responsibility to steward the Pacific Ocean, the largest body of water on the planet Earth. Micronesia makes over 2,000 islands that span the Pacific. It is bigger than the US continent. There is nothing micro about us! Micronesia is more than just the FSM, the Federated States of Micronesia, which includes Koshrai, Pohnpei, Chuk, and yep, Micronesia stretches all the way from Palau on one end to the Marshall Islands on the other. And there is also Saipan and Guam, Nauru and Satawal and Kiribati and too many islands to name. I couldn't name them all here. Our people are so diverse in language and in culture that when you ask us, are you Micronesian? You get this blank look. Because we would say we are
Chukis.
or
Koshayan.
or
Marshallese.
or Pohnpeian. And then we would say, hey, what island you from, huh?
Lukuno. What? Koshai.
Majuro.
And what part of the island, huh?
Lukala. Dunuk. Melon.
I don't know.
With all this beauty and pride, why would we leave our islands? Why would we leave our beautiful homes? We are masters of the currents, ocean navigators. It's in our blood to travel the globe. Yet we all yearn to return home. But nowadays, some of us cannot, for some of our islands are disappearing. Some of our islands have been destroyed by US nuclear bomb testing. And in exchange, they offer us the COFA agreement, which promised us to rebuild, to educate, and to medicate. broken promises. So we must leave. Micronesia to Hawaii are thousands of miles away. You can fly from Guam or Saipan, or you can island hop from Koshrai to Pohnpei to Chuuk, all the way to Honolulu, Hawaii. Now, in the old days, we would sail everywhere because the ocean is our highway. We would go from one island to the other on our canoes just like this. Everybody ready? Paddles up. Amua!
Nale!
Amua!
Nale!
Amua!
Nale!
Amua!
Nale!
And we arrive in Hawaii.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Gosh, that brings back memories. So, Jace, that was their performance in Minneapolis, and that excerpt you saw, you're right, touches upon all the different reasons why Micronesians have left their islands. And among one of those reasons is I just heard, islands disappearing. Uninhabitable. So, and a lot of Micronesian relocating. So, many reasons, and climate change being one of them. We have some great speakers now that are going to be presenting on these specific issues from within their communities. So, Jace, let's introduce our first speaker.
First up, we have Jess Phillip, all the way from Chuuk. Jess is a nature enthusiast, a proud citizen of Chuuk FSM, and a mother to her 80-year-old son, Widi. For more than 10 years, she has been a passionate community organizer and climate change advocate. She's currently in the islands working with various communities and serving at the Chuuk Women's Council as a program coordinator under the Conservation and Environment Program. Jess?
Go ahead and start your video if you can, Jess, and unmute yourself. Share with us what you have in terms of the work that you're doing. Hi, Jess, can you hear us?
Where Jess has been in and out. Oh, there she is.
Hi, Jess.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now. We just introduced you.
Okay, I heard in the beginning, but thank you so much, Jace, for the introduction. And I apologize for the on and off. I'm currently in the islands, as she mentioned, and my network, since I'm in the village, it's not really good. So let's just get into it. First and foremost, I would like to thank all the organizers and everyone who worked very hard to make today's virtual event happening. I've heard a lot about Masters of Currents when I was still abroad, and I was really excited. Like you guys are my big fan. So also thank you so much for inviting me to this platform to share a louder voice on stories relating to climate change happening in and out the islands. I do really appreciate that. And I'm happy to share the narrative on how I shifted my work into climate change. So should I just continue on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a community person and I've been doing community work over 13 years now. However, my first approach in the work on climate change was in 2015. I was an intern in Washington, D.C. with National Capacity, so an NGO, Coalition of Asian Pacific American Community Development, where I confidently grew to take big steps to represent the voices of the underserved and vulnerable communities that are frontlining the struggles of climate change and to ensure that the open world hears us. So thank you to all my mentors at National Capacity. They're the one that really pushed me, Lisa and Melvin. I think you guys are familiar to them. So representing small island nations in a big world, sometimes it could be very challenging due to the lack of information about Pacific Island communities and the Pacific Island regions. But at the end of the day, I know it's our responsibility to keep advocating or talking about who we are, what struggles we are facing, especially in terms of climate change and what's our next step to find solutions to climate problems. I was inspired by the work I did during my internship as an advocate on climate change. So I continue to do it. To me, it doesn't make sense to start a work somewhere and leave it unsolved. So when I returned home to Portland, Oregon, I was very involved in a lot of
It looks like we may have lost some signal in the village there. Um, it's hopefully Jess can come back.
There.
Hey, you're back. Village signal, village signal.
Yes, you're on mute there.
Okay, I'm back.
Yay! Welcome back.
Yeah,
This
so
is how it is.
I
Hey,
think I was where was I? Where was I?
Coming back to Portland, Oregon.
Portland. Yeah, you came back home to Portland, and you were inspired after
Okay,
the
okay,
DC.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. When I returned home to Portland, Oregon, I was very involved in a lot of community work, and a lot of them were related to climate justice. It's important to share the stories about the vanishing islands in Micronesia.
No.
I believe we lost Jess again. The signal in the village has been very challenging. All right. Well, let's see what we can do here. I think we should.
Move to the next.
Yeah, let's move on. Hopefully, Jess can come back and kind of be with us in conversation. Yeah, within the signal that we have, it's been kind of difficult to be in and out. And so I'm gonna move on, and we're gonna bring on Kiki Rivera. So, Kiki, would you just come on? Kiki is an internationally produced award-winning theater artist and educator and arts activist. Kiki has a BA in theater and an MFA in playwriting from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. They are recently seen in the theater across borders resilient migrants, which is yay, a TeAda production in development with asylum seekers and a TeAda impact fellow. Kiki's current role is a community health worker for empowering Pacific Islander communities. Very epic, EPIC. Providing outreach to Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islander communities in California, all throughout the state. And I'm sure there are a lot of Pacific Islander communities here. Kiki believes in self reflective storytelling from a contemporary indigenous perspective and creating space for theater artists of color. And Kiki will share a little bit about climate change theater action. Take it away, Kiki.
Mahalo Ova, mahalo Jace, um, prayers to Jess. All right, Climate Change Theater Action is an organization founded by Elaine Avila, Chantal Bilodeau, and Roberta Levito, and Caridad Fitch that brings global communities together to take action on climate change by using theater as a tool. Every other year, they commission 50 playwrights representing different cultures and indigenous nations all over the world to write a 5-minute play based on a prompt. This year's prompt was to envision what the world would look like after implementing a Green New Deal. In 2019, the prompt was to write something to honor climate heroes who light the way toward a sustainable future. For the 2019 collection, I got to write a play entitled Kumu Kukui, which honors our ancestors who paved the way for our young climate heroes, giving them the strength to implement change. This year, I got the chance to write a play called At What Cost? Now this year, to envision a Green New Deal, to me, is, in my interpretation, to envision a utopia where we're all sustainable and employed and and have a living wage, and we don't have to worry about healthcare. And I don't know if it's because it's just 2021 and we're still living in a pandemic. But envisioning a utopia was really difficult for me. What helped me write was focusing on home, not just Hawaii, but even smaller, focusing on one ahupua'a, one district on one island. What would life look like, and what would it feel like, and you know what that experience would be like 75 years from now, which it doesn't sound like a long time, but we already know throughout history so much can happen in 75 years. So reflecting on that, I think of the Aloha Aina movement. If a Green New Deal was established and applied by the world's superpowers, indigenous peoples' movements would look very different. Maybe it wouldn't be a movement at all. Maybe it would be a lifestyle. So a Green New Deal for me would look like Aloha Aina in practice by everyone. It would look like ea. It would mean sovereignty for the Hawaiian nation. And that's something that I can envision. And that's what At What Cost became for me. It addresses our fears, it reflects on the past still, and it honors our kia'i, our land and sacred spaces protectors. And it also tackles a controversial issue regarding clean energy in Hawaii and the price of clean energy practices. Recently, Kukia'i Kahuku fought Napua Makani, a wind farm out in Kahuku, arguing that the turbines are too big, too close. There are all these studies that prove the danger of the turbines being too close to residences. It endangers people's health and endangers native bats and birds. It's not that these residents are rejecting clean energy. They're questioning whether or not this type of energy really is clean if it's on the backs of native people. Because let's be honest, that's the population that it hits the most. Same for many of the residents on the Leeward Coast who fight PVT Land Company. You know, so many people on the Leeward Coast are just tired of that side of the island being dumped on for the rest of Hawaii. So this and many of the stories that you hear today demonstrate how linked, how interconnected climate change is to the overall health of indigenous communities. So if you're interested in climate change theater action, and reading my play At What Costs, or the 49 other plays by talented playwrights from around the world, the call for producing collaborators is out. So check out the website at climatechangetheateraction.com and add your name to the list if you're interested in participating. The book from last year, Lighting the Way, an anthology of short plays about the climate crisis, is available in paperback and ebook, and also found on the website. Mahalo so much for having us.
Mahalo, Kiki. Thank you for that information on climate change action and theater and bringing the arts and highlighting climate change. I think that's very important. All right, finally, or now, our next speaker, we have Vince Diaz. And Vince is a wonderful, wonderful academic and professor at the University of Minnesota in the Department of American Indian Studies. He is founder and director of the Native Canoe Program. It's amazing. This program uses traditional indigenous watercraft and indigenous water-based ecological knowledge and technology from across Oceania and the native Great Lakes and Mississippi River to advance community engaged research, teaching, and services. This program also mixes hands on, experiential learning and teaching with advanced visualization technologies of virtual and augmented realities, VR, through collaboration with University of Minnesota's Interactive Visualization Lab. And he will share with us about just the community in Milan, the relocated Native Pacific Islanders, and the canoe program. Thank you, Vince, for being here. It was great to be, joining you when we brought the show there. So glad to have you back and to highlight again more of the Micronesian stories.
Kalangan over Pongyalim, Kasalalia Manko, Ite Vince Diaz, and Panene Ponpe Ko Kenkausan Palkalo, and Wayne Kichi. My lineage from Micronesia is to my mother's clan in Pohnpei in Kichi. I'm greeting you guys from Minnesota, Makoche, homeland of the Dakota people, where I teach American Indian Studies. But in American Indian Studies, half of the courses that I teach and all of the research I do involves traditional seafaring from the Central Carolines, especially from a part of the Central Carolines in the Federated States of Micronesia that's the people refer to as Rematao, the people of the sea. I've been working with canoe builders and navigators from several canoe houses in Polowak Atoll. And we do canoe building and learning the traditional techniques and practices of traditional voyaging from the Central Carolines. One of the reasons why I picked University of Minnesota when we were on the job market a few years ago is because there's a big Chukis community in a town called Milan, Minnesota, which is about 3 hours west of the Twin Cities. And what I want to do now is in the context of working with the folks from Milan. Most of the folks are from an island in the Chuk Lagoon called the Romanum, sometimes known as Unanu. And to learning how to build Micronesian style outrigger sailing canoes and learning the traditional practices for long distance voyaging. I wanted to show you a very short clip of a video about our project, and then I wanted to show a couple of more video clips because the work that we do also involves virtual reality simulation, and the idea is very much about addressing climate change and especially the problem of uninhabitable atolls and the people having to leave the island, and the problem of generations of kids who will grow up away from their island and not know much about their islands. But let me ask Max to show the first 2 or so minutes of a recent video from Minnesota Public TV about our project. We come from a people that have thousands of years of traveling through these kinds of crafts and the ability to sail long distance using knowledge about the environment, stars, waves, clouds. To find Micronesian canoes in the plains of Minnesota shouldn't shock us because we have voyaging and movement in our cultural DNA.
My name is Gabriel Elias, and I'm one of the leaders here in our Micronesian community that resides in this area. I live here in town, Milan, and we built a canoe.
So I teach here at the University of Minnesota American Indian Studies. I'm from Micronesia, from the island of Guam, and with lineage to some of the other islands. I started to get to know the folks from Milan. Brought my canoe. I have an outrigger canoe that I've had with me here. And they wanted a canoe of their own. And Michael and Gabriel from the community asked me to help them do that. I'm a historian, but I also look at the survival of seafaring traditions in Micronesia. So that work has got me working with men from Polowat Atoll. I've been doing work with them for about 30 years.
I'm originally from Polowat, one of the islands in Chuuk State, in the federal state of Micronesia, and I live in Saipan with my family. I'm a navigator. I was ordained a navigator 2 or 3 years ago. Back home, that's what we use. We use canoe. We navigate, like islands to get food, to go and fishing. So that's how, since like when I was small, I started like going with my father, with my uncles and cousins, and then I helped them carve canoe, and I was like still a young boy.
I miss what I've been doing back home. Like when I was young, I used to go swimming on the beach, play with friends, go fishing with my uncles. Life is very, really free and unique. Over here, it's totally different. It's a different environment, different life.
With the help of a couple of grants at the university, we put together the funds to bring Mario and an assistant, Laureano. We also wanted them to do work with folks in the upper and lower Sioux communities to build a Dakota dugout as well, what they call wata. That's good. So the project that we work with is actually a project that involves the Micronesians working with Dakota communities. So we built that canoe, but we also built a Dakota dugout for the rivers. And it's basically having the Micronesians learn some of the deeper elements of seafaring culture from their relatives in the Patu Islands, the islands to the west of the Chuuk Lagoon, and specifically from Polowat. Now, when we think about climate change, it's islands like Polowat in particular, the atolls, the smallest islands that are the most endangered immediately. They're in the first, they're in the front end of the, and so most of these islands are going to be uninhabitable very soon because of the rising sea levels that is already encroaching on the waterlands, the fresh waterlands. And so people are going to be already leaving the islands and living out in the diaspora all over the place. And the projects that we're working on also looks to virtual reality technology to address the impact of this diaspora. And in a nutshell, what we're hoping to do is build virtual atolls, like a virtual Polawatt, where until the island is ready to be inhabited, who knows when, folks from the island and generations of kids who ending up in Hawaii or California, or in this case, Minnesota, will be able to have a relationship with Polawatt through their laptops and with goggles, the virtual reality goggles, so that you can imagine, instead of everybody meeting on Facebook, for example, they meet in their island through with avatars, with their like an image of them, and they can walk the footpaths, and we can have a canoe house there, and they can still continue keeping a relationship. So what I wanted to do was also share with you some of the initial work that we've been doing here with some of my colleagues in computer engineering laboratories that do virtual reality. So before I ask Max to put it on, you're going to see a picture of one of the guys, actually Gabriel, putting the goggles on, and then two short video clips of women, one Chuukese woman in the lab, and one of my other colleagues. They put on the goggles, and they're inside a canoe, a virtual canoe, an outrigger canoe, and they're in the Chuk Lagoon. We were able to recreate. It's not the highest video quality yet. It's still animated, but they're inside the canoe in the Chuk Lagoon, and then we also have the capability to sail the canoe. When they pull a line, you'll see them pull a line. It pulls the sail, and it makes the canoe go. And then they can turn the canoe, steer the canoe with a hand. In Polo, they call it fatul, a paddle. And so you'll see some of that. And then the last video clip, there's 3 video clips, and Max, go ahead and run them all at the same time. You'll see what they're seeing inside, as if they're in the canoe. Go ahead, Max. And go ahead and run all of them. Go ahead, play with it.
Wow, these graphics are amazing. There's a lot of light in the sea here.
So let me just say two last things. The first one is, the challenge of rising seas and the fact that the atolls like the Patu Islands, like Pulawat and those other islands, the fact that they're going to be the first to go is a real cruel thing because, like I said before, the people from the Central Carolines between Chuk and Yap, they refer to themselves as the people of the sea. And it's in these islands and in other atolls across Micronesia where the ancient traditions of long distance canoe building and the ability to sail long distances using knowledge of the clouds, the waves, the stars, sea creatures, remarkable knowledge. It's also from there that the revival of seafaring tradition across all of Oceania, which is a big part of the resurgence and renaissance across the Pacific. It's there. It's from our atolls where that knowledge was helped jumpstart that revival. And it's a cruel thing that it's going to be the people of the sea who may very well not be able to survive rising seas. And what that means is it raises the question of whether this tradition of this ancient tradition that is probably one of the most important foundations of our identity. It's a real question whether that's going to be able to survive rising seas and the future generations no longer living in the atolls. And so it's especially urgent for us to be successful in exploring virtual reality to replicate or simulate the islands, so that even if there's a lot of generations of kids who grow up away from their islands, they can still have a relationship with the island and know the stories about the place until the time in the future when they can return. The second point I wanted to make is, in addition to being hands-on and virtual reality, and we don't see virtual reality as a replacement or a substitute for the real thing. But in addition to that, the project of teaching Micronesian culture in Minnesota has to involve the indigenous people of Minnesota, the Dakota. And so when these guys asked me to help them learn their traditions and bring out the folks I work with, I also tell them that, you're in Minnesota Makoche now, you're in Dakota country, and a good traditional Micronesian navigator always learns where he or she is at. They learn the waters, the lands, the stars, wherever they are. It's absolutely necessary. And so to be a good traditional Micronesian navigator, which is something you don't want to lose in the midst of the diaspora of leaving the islands, you're going to have to also learn the indigenous knowledge of the place that you're find yourself in. So in the 21st century, Micronesian culture is going to have to embrace the indigenous cultures of every place that it goes to. So Kalangan, Ova, and TeAda Productions for inviting me. I'm also a fan of your work.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's been amazing to hear the project that's there, and we were so fortunate to be able to JC and the cast members and the crew were able to actually paddle in the canoe there in the Mississippi with Vince and learn more about the program. And additionally, we were able to visit the Micronesian community in Milan and really just connect, right, JC? How was that? Tell folks about that, JC.
Well, it was like you mentioned, we had the chance to get on the canoe and paddle it on the Mississippi River. And that was just an out of the body experience to be able to connect those two cultures, and then to see our brothers and sisters of Chuk in Milan. That was just an awesome experience. And we thank you for that, Vince, for taking part of that.
JC, we have a Jess back. Let's
Yes.
see if we can bring Jess back because as Vince was talking about how, Polowat and the atolls there on the islands, let's bring the village back and see what Jess has to share with us. Jess, can you see if your video can be turned on or your audio?
Yes. Can you guys
And
hear me?
there we go. Yes, we hear you.
Hear you. Go ahead, Jess.
She's frozen again.
Okay. Wow. That's very challenging. But hey, if you're out in you got to know what you got to do. So here's what we're gonna do now. Let's Hey Jess, can you speak? Can you hear? Can we hear you? I see you now.
Okay. Are we on the discussion or like where I'm
We're not at
lost?
the discussion. We're about to go there, but I wanted to ask, how's it over there in Chuk in terms of climate change and the impact it's having there?
Okay. So let me just share the experience here in the islands. I moved back to Chuk in 2018, and right there I came during the drought. That's yeah. So the islands has been like struggling, experiencing different climate issues. There is like drought spell, like they don't even know when will be a drought season. They don't know when it's high tide because it's not like before when we have our own calendar to follow. But this time it's just like it happened. Like we don't know it's gonna be next month. We don't know if it's gonna be drought. So uh, lately there has been a high tide experience like in the islands, even in the lagoon and in the outer islands. So that's really crazy. But what we've been doing right now is trying to. I work with True Comments Council, and like the work
Oh,
climate change
technology.
adaptation.
Oh, there.
Say that again, Jess. Oh, technology. Technology. You know what? Let's bring all our guests back and we can continue this conversation and hopefully Jess can jump in and out of that. I mean, Vince, you've been to uh, Poloat and stuff. I mean, I don't know when's the last time you've been there. Have you seen what changes have you seen? Obviously, I mean, you're talking about it and bringing that knowledge.
It's been a while. I left Guam in 2001 for after teaching 10 years at the University of Guam. And so the last time was just before that. I try to maintain contact with we until COVID we go home every summer and always connect with the folks, and then I've also brought, as you saw in the video, some of the guys from Polowat out here or in Michigan and in Illinois where I was at. But the rate of uh, migration is continuing. And the island doesn't have to be completely inundated for it to be uninhabited, because
Right.
already if you compromise the water lens, the water, the wells. Already the taro is already, the water's already brackish, so I mean, it's just a disaster. But I think it's important it's important to do everything we can to maintain connection to the islands, and that's what we do out here. The we're, where I am in Minnesota, the distance between me and the Pacific Ocean right now is actually shorter than if I was from Guam to the Marshall Islands.
Mm.
So Guam to Marshall Islands is larger than the continental United States. So
Yeah.
so from here, Minnesota to the Pacific Ocean in California is nothing. So uh, and and people don't realize how big the Pacific is. But what's special about the islands that do the seafaring is that tradition that continued in the Patu Islands, like Polowat, Sadawal, those islands out there, or in the Marshall Islands. That's the continuation of a seafaring culture that's 4,000 to 6,000 years old, and the people. That's what made people. That's what allowed our ancestors to settle all of the Pacific. And there's evidence that it reaches America, but people don't realize that the voyage went the opposite direction too, towards Africa, across the Indian Ocean. And so you have languages and outrigger canoes in the east coast of Africa, in Madagascar, in coastal areas of South Asia, of course, all across Southeast Asia. So between the huge part of the Pacific onto the Indian Ocean to the other side, you're covering almost 4/5 of the world's southern hemisphere. That's us. We've been traveling for thousands and thousands of years and covering a big geography. So from Minnesota to the Pacific is nothing. And so but it's especially important that what makes us different are our cultural practices like that, and the relationship we have with the islands and with the water world, and rising climate change and rising seas is directly threatening that part of Oceania that continued to practice that in an organic, living way. For them, doing this is not a project, it's their life.
Mm.
And so it's extremely important that we look to the best of what we have today to continue that. And so virtual reality is pretty amazing reality. We can the more developed the technology gets, the more realistic it is to fool yourself that you're in the island. But again, there's no substitute for being in the island, but this is going to have to do, right? And the other thing is, we're not just using cool technology to help the islands. One of the things we're doing is using the traditional knowledge to shape the virtual reality technology.
Mm.
So it's not simply using Western technology to help the islands. Where the traditional knowledge that is at the foundation of who we are can also challenge how we do science. So that's the kind of thing we're doing.
Just exciting. Definitely. Wow, amazing. I wanted to ask. This is for maybe Jess and Jace. I mean, even Kiki had asked this at one time. where in the U.S. are the Micronesian communities relocating? Because obviously you had mentioned Minnesota. I mean, we met folks in Minnesota, and as Masters of the Currents has been touring, I mean, we're connecting. We've connected with some people in Utah. So I mean, just chime in on that. I'd love to know more.
Well, for me, that was the beauty of Masters of the Currents because I thought I knew where we were migrating to until I joined Masters of the Currents. And then I find out there's a whole community out in Minnesota. Who would have thought? So I don't know, like, I don't know, I guess there's more to discover. Otherwise, yeah, Minnesota, Hawaii, Oregon.
There's a big Marshallese population in Arkansas.
Mm,
Big Pohnpeian and Chuukese communities in Kansas.
true.
I won't be surprised if there's Micronesians in every state.
True. Yes.
But the big communities are in the West Coast and also Arkansas. What I found out recently is there's another big Micronesian community in the Twin Cities, but they're all the ages they range from a few months old to like 14 and 15. This is Marshallese kids that were adopted into families that belong to church groups in the Twin Cities, St. Paul area. There's something like 30 or 40 of there's a
Yeah.
And what's really cool about this group of parents is that they have a summer language culture camp for the kids where the kids' relatives and cultural folks from the Marshall Islands come over every year and they do a language culture camp. And that's really something that these parents here, believe that just because they adopted these Marshallese kids doesn't mean they stop being Marshallese. And so we've begun talking to them about working with I know the canoe builders in Marshall Islands, and so hopefully when COVID ends we'll put some money together and build a Marshallese canoe for these guys. And I'm sure Jess with the community in Portland, the Marshallese built a canoe over there in Portland, and once we're settled in a little more, we want to connect with everybody out here in the mainland too. There's probably maybe 4 outrigger canoes in the mainland now, Micronesian style. So we wanna just keep doing this stuff.
Well, building and networking and expanding Oceania here on the continent is just beautiful. I wanted to jump to Kiki and ask, how did you hear about climate change theater action? And did you reach out to them or did they reach out to you? And, how has that been going? And in terms of Micronesian stories, I mean, I know, have there been any artists? Because, as Masters of the Currents, it's one of the challenges for us is that we are one of the few plays that talk about that community. But to advocate and inform people about climate change has been a challenge. When we were in Minnesota, meeting Vince was great. Having heard about Climate Generation, which is an organization that works to advocate for action on climate change, we would partner up with them. So in terms of the partnerships or the work, any thoughts on that, Kiki?
Yeah, well, Masters of the Current is a rare gem. um, I got involved through Dan Kellen, HTY, because he's friends with Chantal, and that's how I became linked up with them. And I have no agency over what they choose. I've never seen any Micronesian representation in the 50 plus playwrights. I've seen representation from Aotearoa, but I think, there's always space for storytelling from the Micronesian islands. Because, like Vince was explaining, it's just so vast. And, like, you guys, just to quote you guys, there's nothing micro about it.
True. True.
I'm curious, Ova and Kiki, if I wasn't involved with Masters of the Currents, like I had no idea about that, but I was interested in theater or playwriting, what's the first step I would take?
Well, I think the first step would be to reach out to the people who are already doing the work.
Hmm.
Because people who work, like TeAda is a theater community, a theater production company that works with community, directly with community. And so just finding the space, finding the people who are working directly with community is a huge help. And I found that artists, the Pacifica artists in general, are always very open to collaborations and they're very accessible. And that's one of my mentors would tell me to always give it forward, pay it forward. Um, so as we rise together.
Mm.
Um, so I think now that there are Micronesian playwrights and theater artists right here, it's in community engagements like this one that helps bring other people up and show people that that storytelling is really so important and it's going to save the world and save our cultures and communities.
Yeah.
I wanted to make an observation, Ova and Jaceline. The communities that I'm familiar with out here, they're close knit. They hang together and they tend to um, they they tend to keep focused amongst themselves or with their relatives elsewhere through Facebook or and these guys travel a lot. That whether it's for church networking or sports. The sports is the other big one.
Yeah. I see.
Um,
Football,
but
basketball.
but when these guys here encounter something that's out there, I watched them when they came over to watch the play. They
Mhm.
chartered a bus, right? And
Yeah.
70 folks came over.
Yeah.
And that day there was two plays, one in the afternoon, and then we had a talk story, right? Myself
Yep.
and two folks from the Dakota community colleagues, and we
Right.
were talking about indigenous networking, that kind of stuff. But then this, but then the community arrived in the bus, and they came in for the evening play,
Hmm.
and I went out to get dinner, and I came back just at the ending when they all came up to the stage, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you know what I was going to observe is so here's these guys who are they're out in the margins. They're in the western part. They're closer to North Dakota than
Hmm.
they are to the Twin Cities. So
Yeah.
they're in the rural area, and it's cornfields and soy fields. It's very rural. Um, um, and so they just keep amongst themselves.
Mm.
But then they would have never imagined associating the Twin Cities to go see something about Micronesia, and then see that the 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 cast is Micronesian and the story is it's not just Pacific, it's Micronesia, it's Chukis. They saw themselves and they saw the canoe and we're working on canoes and so those things are those are absolutely powerful. They have a connection to climate crisis
Hmm.
because first of all, even if they're not from the atolls, for example, and even if they have their own reasons for leaving, in many ways they're also these are they're also economic refugees. They're climate and economic refugees. They're pushed and pulled away from their islands. And the question is always, who am I? What will my future be? What are my values out here away from the islands? That is the foundation and the basis. The language comes out of that. It's just a very different world, like what Gabriel said in the video. This is very different here, but I think the point that I wanted to say is that we have to continue to build upon a long history of travel to just keep it going. So even if climate change is what we call a rupture, a break in what seems to be normal, and that's a big break. You can't live in your island anymore. But what defines that island is also travel in a traditional way. And if we can grab that and make that a part of their reality out here, it's like bringing the islands with you. Because so much, literally, the ability to travel long distance involves a very technical process of how to move your island. That's not a metaphor, that's a technique. The Turkish term etak means moving island. And that's one of the very important ways of that. It was the development of etak, along with the development of the canoe technology, that allowed people to travel widely and become the people of those islands. And so in a moment of climate crisis, you're going to have to continue to move now because of new forces. But the moving doesn't mean you're leaving behind who you are. And so the projects that we're doing and the projects that you guys are doing is part of the process of bringing the islands out where people are ending up, and showing that you could live this far away, but you're always actually etak involves only being one leg away from your island. That's the idea of moving an island. The way you travel the biggest expanse across the Pacific is you're always taking a step. And that step involves comparing the local knowledge that you know about your islands, the water, the sky, the surf, the winds, the stars, and then taking that to the next horizon. That's the next step. And you can be thousands of miles away, but you're only always one step away from the familiar. You're constantly incrementally moving your island forward a little bit at a time. So I guess I wanted to underscore the need for people who care about Micronesians to keep working to bring, in many different ways, to bring the islands with them. But like I said, you're also entering other people's worlds.
Yes.
Other indigenous people's worlds. And so, but the good thing about seafaring is it teaches you that you always have to know where you are. And the best way to know where you are is to get to have good relations with the natives of that place. Otherwise we're as guilty as settlers.
Yes.
Colonialism, so our traditions and seafarings, tradition in particular, is a good way to bring your island with you and make it the basis for developing a good relation with the natives of that place.
The land that you're on.
And we'll find out that the natives of that place are always traveling as well. And we can compare notes.
A lot of groundedness and connectivity. I mean, this is, we're all connected.
Yeah, that's right.
The
Grounded.
ocean connects us, the earth connects us. I mean, and it goes back to what Kiki and and you've been saying about just really grounding oneself in your where you're at, and knowing where you're at, and wherever you're at is where
And so that's absolutely right. And so in a moment of crisis, one of the best things we could do is realize when we have to move, right? The reality of rising seas and the uninhabitable islands.
right.
One of the best things we can do is to realize that our traditions of movement, canoe building and navigation, is one of the best ways to ground yourself.
Mm. Yep.
Mm.
Well, Jess is grounding herself in the village.
I'm glad Jess is there, because I have a love relationship with Chuk. Even if I'm Pohnpeian, I was born and raised on Guam. My relatives, if they might be listening, they always say, "How come you're always working with those Chukis?" That's like because they still know their tradition, not you anymore. No, just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, it's also going back to what you're saying, Vince, about having to return back. I mean, Jess is a great example of
Yeah.
that. Of having been here, coming here, Portland, and then you realize now you're like, well, I'm going to go back with the knowledge that I have here to go back and forth and really kind of learn more and connect more in a different way. So still, just amazing.
I was really enjoying when Jess said that she was working in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that in the creation of the FSM, the building of the nation, FSM, right?
Mhm. Federated States of
A lot of the early leaders of the building of the nation come from the outer islands.
Mhm.
And that's because everybody knows that far from being primitive or simple, you got some of the most sophisticated travelers from the outer islands because they're comfortable traveling.
Right.
They if you can travel in a canoe through a typhoon 10 hours to California in an airplane is nothing.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Micronesians are resilient survivors. I just gotta say that's really. I mean, and to think about it, similarly, to go from the oceans into the continents, and having to adapt and adjust, and so I think that's just been amazing, beautiful, beautiful. Well, I think any last words by our guests? I think we were.
I want to say something.
Yes,
Can
Jeff.
you guys?
Say it so that you can get it in, because I know you're in and out.
Okay, I'm not gonna turn on my camera, but
for it.
I really enjoy the story on those Micronesians in Twin City, Minnesota, and I like how Vicente said build a long history of travel. I think I just want to highlight that there is a reason why Micronesian called navigators, and that's really rooted in our own, like, we've been navigators for a long time, but today, like, we are navigators in modern style. So like in the islands, now that I'm back and I like relearn all these histories, like there are reefs in the oceans, islands that are like they they have like specific names, and it's like named after all these legendary navigators from Micronesia. And it's amazing how like there is an island or like a reef out in Pana Bay or like around there called Oraluk. And when we translate it in like Chugis, it's like it's a reef for Chugis or something like that. So that's how I know like navigators is like really embedded in our culture. And also I want to mention how like we also touch base on indigenous people. Like indigenous people are across the world, I think we are all navigators or travelers in our own way of navigating the world. Like in the Pacific, we are navigators, especially when it comes to the ocean, all around like little islands to another to discover, like just the sea, the islands. And when I was in Morago, I've noticed that like the indigenous people live in the Sahara Desert, and they're the nomads, and they travel through deserts, and that's really like I I kind of connect like, wow, this is so interesting. Like this is another indigenous community
Mm.
in a whole.
Yeah.
She's probably frozen again.
But yeah, a whole different landscape, I would think. But it's still, again, knowing where you are,
Mhm.
it's really just central. Well, Jace, we should thank our guests for today. Thank you for this rich conversation. Thank you, Kiki. Thank you, Vince. Thank you, Jess, for bringing up just wonderful talk and spirit, yeah, inspired by the play and climate change. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yes, thank you, Kalangan, mahalo. Just uh, rich conversations. Thank you.
And we want to also thank behind the scenes Max and Jade for just amazing work today. Thank you so much, Max and Jade, who are behind the scenes. Um, well, we thank you all for joining us, right, Jace?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining our Coconut Wireless. I
If you like our program, please consider donating to TeAda,
yeah,
and you may visit TeAda's
ways
page.
to give page.
Mhm.
Ways to give page to learn how you can support.
That's right. And where I think Max can show us some of the slides of upcoming things for TIRA and Masters of the Currents. One of which is where we'll be having another conversation with the cast for USC's Visions and Voices here in Los Angeles. We also have, I believe, coming up Utah. We're hoping to present the play in Utah, where there's a lot of Pacific Islanders there in Salt Lake City. I know that over in Utah in the hopefully in the fall, and then in June we're having our annual TeAda Talks conversation, so that'll be coming up as well. Just to say that these are things coming up, so please keep in touch with us. Um, we have a couple other slides. Go ahead and go on to the next slide.
So here are some resources: climate change theater action. You may look up their website for more information. The Native Canoe Program. And then next slide. COVID resources. The COVID19.ca.gov, and then myturn.ca.gov. Some resources for COVID.
Yeah, get yourselves vaccinated. And this is the FSM Task Force USA. What is that?
Um, So you can either access our website or Facebook for information on resources where you can get assistance if you've been affected, like rental assistance, all of that resource, where to get vaccinated, and if you have any questions, you can always shoot a question through message.
Next slide, Max. Is empowering Pacific Islander communities. I mean, this whole Coconut Wireless is all about connecting, Oceania and Pacific Islanders. So Kiki works for empowering Pacific Islander communities, If you're interested, please check out their website and get more information. Thank you. Moving on. You want to say anything, Kiki?
Yeah, that's actually the Pacific Islander Health website. So it's our website for Pacific Islanders. That's not the Epic website.
Oh,
it's resources for people in Southern California.
Got it. Thank you for that. And what else do we have, Max? Is that it? Yay! Thank you so much, everyone. We also want to say one more thing. Vince, Kiki, Max, and Jay, let's wish JC Lean a happy birthday. Today is her birthday, actually.
Oh, it's also Jess's birthday in Chuk.
Oh,
so
Jess.
21st and 22nd in Chuk.
Oh my gosh! Happy birthday!
Happy birthday to you all.
Happy birthday, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much again for your time, ladies and gentlemen, viewers out there tuning in. We appreciate your time, and thank you again, Vince, Kiki, our wonderful guests, Max and Jade. Mahalo, mahalo.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you guys again.
Thank you, mahalo.
Thank you, Max, Jade. Nice meeting you, Kiki.
So good to meet you, Vince.
Kasikani korani wow, Vai na kaetani kona imerawa. 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 Unatipa kuna kane